to that, she served as the Dean of Development Studies at Mbarara University from 1998 to 2010, where she established the Faculty of Development Studies, which was later transformed into an institute. She moved up the ranks to become the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Mbarara University, where she served her term for 5 years. Pamela has served on several boards, including the African Research and Resource Center, the Swedish International Center for Local Democracy, and the National Council for Science and Technology in Uganda, among others. She is a former Fulbright African Scholar, having spent time at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced and International Studies in Washington, D.C. in 2006, doing research and writing on the topic of developmental studies of developmental states in Africa. She also was the Claude Eck Visiting Professor at the Nordic Africa Institute in 2013 and was Visiting Commonwealth Scholar at the University of Leeds in 2012, conducting research and writing on oil governance and land governance, respectively. Her current areas of research include the changing nature and character of the state in Africa, the political economy of oil, peace building, and land governance in Africa. She has quite a number of publications, among which is Oil Governance Institutions in Uganda, Fit for Purpose, published in Oil Wealth in Uganda and Beyond. Prospects, Opportunities, and Challenges. She has also published Winners and Losers, Contestation over Land in the Advent of Oil Exploration in Uganda, published in Governing Natural Resources for Africa's Development, Rutledge, Taylor, and Francis, London, 2017. She has published Land Deals in Uganda, An Invisible Hand in Land Grabbing and Rural Development. Other publications include The Potentiality of Development States in Africa, Uganda and Botswana Compared, The Emerging Oil Industry in Uganda, A Blessing or a Curse, as well as Women Always Have Had Their Special Place in History as Peacemakers, Women and Peace Building in the Great Lakes region. Wow, there is a lot more, but that should give you a glimpse on who Pamela is. Professor Mbabazi, we cannot wait to hear what you have for us this morning. Welcome to address the forum.
Thank you very much, Madam Apofia, for that very generous introduction. Let me begin by thanking Castle organization and the organizers of this webinar for inviting National Planning Authority and myself in particular to be a part of this very invigorating discussion. It is very refreshing to actually learn more about what Castle is doing to create a platform for engagement and debate and conversations around the pertinent issues affecting our country. And thank you all so very much for really tabling the Vision 2040, because it is our duty as Ugandans, it is important that we discuss and debate and have a common understanding of where we're going as a country and be able to really understand what it will take to transform our country. So I want to really appreciate you so very much for giving us an opportunity to share ideas. I want to thank Mr. Fred. I think Fred has done an amazing job in detailing out where we've come from, in a sense, where we have come from as a country in terms of Vision 2040, what the challenges are, how COVID has affected the whole process, and what is being thought about. But I thought that I should perhaps add more context in our understanding of where as a country we have come from, because as I think it was Marcus Matiagavi, the West Indian philosopher, that talked about a people without a history is like a tree without roots. So we need as a country to really understand, where have we come from? Where are we now? What and how has COVID affected us? What do we need to move forwards? And I tend to dwell more on the positives. Yes, COVID is with us. Yes, the entire globe is faced with a challenge, but we need to look at opportunities. We need to challenge our thinking more and see, how do we emerge from this? We've come a long way. We've been resilient. We can make progress, but it will require us all to think, debate, discuss, have a real common understanding of where we want to go. That said, where have we come from as a country? You're aware, dear participants and everybody on this webinar, that when the NRM government captured power in 1986, the economy was in a complete free fall. There was a downward spiral of our economy, and there were two major reforms that the NRM government undertook at the time. And one of them is the fundamental economic reforms between 1986 and 1996. And under this phase, the economy was put on a path to economic recovery, in a sense, because there was still political instability, and there was civil war in, well, there's still war in northern Uganda, but and the economy was facing major challenges at the time. And this, that period enabled us to pretty much increase effectiveness and efficiency in public expenditure and service delivery to some extent. Then we have the second phase of reform, which was a poverty eradication action plan. That was between 1997 to 2009. And during this phase, government launched the poverty eradication effect with some mixed success. Now, and Fred mentioned this about the comprehensive national development planning framework that set the stage for our thinking and having a vision over 30 years. And this is the premise within which Vision 2040 has been able to be rolled out in the 6 phases that, again, Mr. Fred talked about. Now, fast forward, NDP3 is the 3rd national development plan of this comprehensive national development framework that leads us to 2040. Now, as Fred rightly pointed out, in our conceptualization of NDP3, we had to take stock of how have we progressed as a country in NDP1 and NDP2. And as he rightly noted, we achieved some progresses, some achievements were registered, some of which he noted about. Sustainable peace and security, we are enjoying security and some level of macroeconomic stability. We have, of course, increased our life expectancy. Paved roads have increased, the percentage of paved roads. Electricity generation capacity has also increased from about 11% to 25%. And my colleague will come in to give all the details in the numbers if there is time. Now, at the same time, much as we've achieved some progress, there are some challenges that we noted that NDP1 and NDP2 has not been able to address as we move forward as a country. And one of the major challenges we have as a country that informed our formulation of NDP3 is the youth bulge. You're aware, dear participants, that over the last 20 years, government has invested heavily in the social sectors, which has led to improvements in health and education, particularly in reducing infant and child mortality. However, our population is growing, and we have one of the largest youthful populations on the continent. At the same time, the opportunities for employment are not growing as we would want as a country, and this is what we have focused on as a priority in NDP3, to address the problem of our youth bulge and the lack of jobs. The high cost of electricity is the other problem that we feel as a country. If we're going to transform, we need to light Uganda. We need to light our country, to be able to transform our country, but still the cost of electricity is still high. There has been a lot of persistent vulnerabilities. You saw the challenges we faced in the country not so long ago, particularly in the urban areas, with many of our youth without employment, and that puts them in a challenging situation. But even more importantly is the wide regional disparities. You will recall in the reading of the budget, our Honorable Minister of Finance noted that whereas in much of the country, we've before COVID been experiencing reduction in poverty, there are pockets of this country where poverty is actually increasing. I will mention Busoga, Bukedi, Teso are areas of concern, and the National Development Plan is trying to specifically address these regional disparities. The other area is limited skills mismatch. Our education system is preparing our young people not for the job market. We need to address that. And NDP3 has also specifically looked at this. The limited access and high cost to capital. Our private sector needs to be given access to low cost capital to provide the jobs that I talked about. And NDP3 is specifically looking at this. Continued reduction in the forest cover is a challenge. The other problem is wetland degradation. Climate change is here with us. NDP has come out very clearly, categorically to address these challenges. I am highlighting these issues because they are what informed our thinking and prioritization of NDP even before COVID came. Now, let me move to the impact of COVID. And as Mr. Fred rightly pointed out, it has, in a way, affected our NDP3, but not in a bad way, because we had actually not launched the NDP3. We were at the tail end of completing the NDP3 when COVID came with us. Indeed, we had thought of the risks, but not to the extent that COVID has presented to us. Nevertheless, we were able to reorganize our priorities in the NDP3. And by the time we launched NDP3 in June, we had incorporated the anticipated challenges and opportunities that we have with us. But I would like to take this opportunity, and if you allow me, moderator, to highlight what the priority areas in the NDP3 are. And dear participants, just to reiterate what the major goal of NDP3 is, it is improving household incomes and the quality of life of Ugandans. And we intend to address this by focusing on 5 key goals, 5 key objectives, as it were. Enhancing value addition in key growth opportunities, and this is through agro and mineral-based industrialization. We intend to strengthen the private sector to drive growth. I talked about the private sector being weak and not being able to access low cost. We are looking at consolidating and increasing the stock and quality of our infrastructure, enhancing productivity and well-being of our population, and also the 5th one being the increased role of the state. But let me focus more on the impacts of COVID and what we are doing right now, and what I think we could, as a country, and we need to challenge our thinking more. There are at least 5 transmission channels, and I see that the time is running out, through which the impact of the disease of COVID may affect our economy. And these we have tried to look at in our plan. Now, government has moved to mitigate the potential impacts of fast-tracking implementation of import substitution, because as you well know, COVID has affected our exports. It has affected the prices of our commodities. You see the milk, you see the matoke, you see most of our commodity prices have fallen, and this is affecting our farmers. Now, what we have indicated in our agro-industrialization program is to focus on import substitution, and in that way, promote exports in the region. And as Fred rightly noted, focusing more on serving the regional market, the African Continental Free Trade Area, will give us an opportunity as a country to develop our capacity to produce specific goods. And I want us to challenge our thinking more and see how do we work together as Ugandans, as a community, to empower our producers to produce for our regional and local market. Government has also prioritized implementation of programs and projects that strengthen the development of a real economy. Fred rightly pointed out, tourism has been affected, but we need to also look at how do we position Uganda to take advantage of the challenges that COVID has brought in order to benefit as a country. So government is looking at prioritizing the real economy and focusing more, for instance, on producing the medicines that we require, that have, the demand for medicines have gone up during COVID, and we need as a country to produce the commodities that we are consuming most. Government has also increased capitalization of UDB and UDC to create opportunities for our private sector to access low-cost capital, another challenge that the NDP3 poses. And finally, government is in the process of finalizing the local content, specifically to strengthen our private sector. So in conclusion, and I want to touch on just one point that Fred posed the question, are the goals of NDP3 too ambitious? I don't think so. I think that we need to set ourselves realistic goals that will enthuse us, that will challenge us to aim higher. And we need to work together to prioritize. COVID has made it possible for us to rethink and see where do we put our limited resources where they will have the biggest impact. And in terms of the NDP3, I think that the priorities that I mentioned, where we want to strengthen the private sector to drive growth, are very important. We need to provide access to affordable capital for our private sector to create jobs for our people and produce and invest in those commodities. We need to develop our local content. So the goals, in my view, are not ambitious, they're achievable, but we need to reprioritize. Will our targets in NDP3 be achieved to have any meaningful effect and impact on the lives of the ordinary Ugandans if we are only able to undertake the necessary reforms that the NDP3 has presented, and we fast track implementation of our NDP3? I'm very confident, I'm sure, by the grace of God, that we can achieve these targets. Fred, finally, a moderator, mentioned the need for establishing a comprehensive framework for monitoring and evaluation. And for me, that is so key. One of the challenges we're facing as a country is data. We need, and I'm glad that, Fred mentioned the issue of investing in science and technology. We need to create an opportunity for us to collect the relevant and reliable data to monitor and evaluate effectiveness. Thank you. I didn't have enough time, but my colleague, Dr. Asmani, will be able to highlight the issues more. And I want to apologize, I had to rush through, but I hope another opportunity will obtain in the new year and we will be able to engage. Thank you. Be blessed immensely.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pamela. I hope you have time for just one question or two.
I will take one for sure.
Okay. Now, our think piece presenter today mentioned impediments that have affected the level of implementation. You've just touched on it as you concluded. Right. Affected the level of implementation in NDP 1 and 2. One of which was the slow level of implementation and very slow progress. Yes, the word slow, slow as opposed to low, set me thinking. Slow would mean we are steadily progressing towards our goal, achieving our milestones, but at a sluggish pace. And when we refer to the poll question we just had, 61% think we are on the right track, but behind schedule. 15% tied at thinking that we are off the road and our vision is difficult to achieve. It's only 4% who think we are on course. So whereas low would mean we have picked one or two things and done them and not really focused on all our milestones, slow is we are sluggish. So which is it? Are we slow or are we low in performance? And why do you think so?
Thank you, Apofia. That is a whole lecture, and I wish I had the time to really. But it's a very important question and a very real one, because we have the best plans, the best goals and documents that would, in holding other things constant, you would pick our plan and move with it if you're given a different context. But why is it that in this country, in Uganda, we have failed to hit the mark? The answer lies, in my view, in the low capacity of our public service to perform, but also the high prevalence of corruption. That is one of it, but it's a whole array of factors. But I will touch on that specifically. True, as Fred mentioned, government borrowed a huge amount of funding in NDP 1, NDP 2. We raised a lot of taxpayers' money and spent on so many national projects. Not many have been achieved. And the biggest challenge is the low capacity of the public service to implement. There is a challenge in the mindsets of us as Ugandans. We need to change our way of thinking. The prevalence of corruption, the service above self, is lacking in public service, but also the prevalence of corruption is a challenge. The silo way of working, people are preserving their territories. There is no uniformity of working together as one government to deliver a common result. And this is what we've tried to put in the NDP 3. And Dr. Asmani, I'm hoping you'll be very, very real and deliberate in being open to Ugandans and telling us the real truth that we need to change our thinking. If we decide and agree to serve government, to serve public, to become a civil servant, then do it as it should be. I think our thinking and mindsets are problematic. There is too much me, myself, and I, and a little sense of serve above self. That needs to be addressed, but also the challenge of corruption and working together under the program to deliver common results. So briefly, those are the few issues, but we also require the requisite skills to plan and do proper feasibilities for our projects. Many a times we've rushed to borrow money when we have not even done just a minuscule of the feasibility of whether that project is actually viable. And that is very problematic. But we are addressing these issues. We've set up, for instance, a unit, a feasibility studies unit, to undertake feasibility studies across government at the National Planning Authority to ensure that no loan is obtained unless we have done a thorough and complete feasibility analysis of the project and established whether that project is viable. And we have laid down the entire value chain of how it's going to be. So Madam Apofia, I would have loved to continue, and I'm praying that you'll give me another opportunity next year, inshallah. We need to challenge our thinking more. We cannot afford as a country to implement our plan that is not correct. And it's not, things are not cast in concrete. As we make progress after 1 year, we will review and see, wait a minute, is this what was the right way, to do? They talked about the local government and parish model. If we find there are some bits of hurdles, we will reorganize. That's what planning is all about. And we need the ideas, the discussions, the insights, the knowledge from experts like yourselves, from peace-loving Ugandans like those on this fora, to really tell us in real terms where we are not doing it right and where we're doing right, to thank us as well. But thank you and be blessed immensely.
Thank you very much. I wish we had time. I would have engaged you on some of those things you said, but I will engage Dr. Guloba after you have gone. We thank you so much for your time, and we wish you well. We will follow you up and see how to take you up on the offer to engage a little bit more. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too, and all the best. Enjoy the discussion. Bye for now.
Thank you. We continue with thanks to Dr. Pamela Mbabazi for having given us that time to be with us. We will move on to our first discussant, who is Dr. Monica Musenelo. I take the pleasure to invite Dr. Musenelo to speak to us. Dr. Monica is the Senior Presidential Advisor, Epidemics, and Chair, Presidential Scientific Initiative on Epidemics for the Government of Uganda. She is the Chief Advisor to the Presidency and Government on matters concerning epidemics and science, and also coordinates national scientific efforts to develop tools that address epidemics. She has worked as an Assistant Commissioner, Epidemiology and Surveillance in the Ministry of Health, Uganda, where she headed the Epidemiology and Surveillance Division, the focal point for epidemiology, integrated disease surveillance and response and international health regulations in the Ministry of Health. She has been a consultant epidemiologist for a German organization in Sierra Leone, whose pronunciation I cannot even begin to attempt. Maybe she'll pronounce it for us, where she supported community containment of Ebola. She served as the technical advisor into the response activities. Monica has been a consultant epidemiologist with the World Health Organization, among many others. She is a Master of Public Health in Field Epidemiology from Makerere University, and a Master of Science in Microbiology and Immunology from Cornell University, United States. She has a Bachelor of Veterinary Medicine from Makerere University. Let us welcome Monica to give us a response to the Castle think piece. Welcome, Oxide Monica. Please take the podium.
Thank you very much, Apofia, and thank you so much, Fred, for that wonderful piece. Personally, I am a person who thinks strategically. I find it difficult to focus on things when they're just done just for now. So when Vision 2040 came out, actually I first started paying attention to the strategic plans of Uganda with Vision 2025, which somehow disappeared, and I don't know where it went. I remember going to Uganda House to look for a copy. And when Vision 2040 came out, I took it very serious. And in my response, I want to just project a few slides, not many. Zoom tends to refuse to move. Okay, so in this one slide, quite a number of years ago, I summarized Vision 2040. And I created where we were. This on the left was the poverty map then, and on the right was the journey where we were going, and then what the Vision 2040 laid out. And I saw that as a journey that we were going to walk as Ugandans, and a journey that we were going to walk step by step, but also a journey of patience. And in the think piece, we talk about some achievements which have been made, and we also talk about quite a number of impediments that have possibly prevented us from reaching where we should have been. It's true, the implementation of Vision 2040 is behind. And personally, I support the majority in the poll that we are on course, sort of, we are on course, largely on course, but the implementation is woefully slow. I think we haven't reached halfway the goals of NDP 1. And so NDP 2, which took a lot of what was in NDP1 was carried into NDP2. And so if we're going to achieve Vision 2040 in those 6 strategic 5-year plans, we must accelerate. But for me, one of the issues is that although Vision 2040 is very focused, it has a flow. It has a flow to an extent that I was able to extract this one slide, the key areas and what they were talking about, and to visualize it, because I'm a visual person. One of the things which has slowed us is research. Because as you can see, this was, I did this, I think in 2012 or something around there. That's when I developed this slide. And as you can see, research, which it was supposed to generate the information to guide us in the implementation, it was so important, because walking a journey of where we are in Uganda as an African underdeveloped country, to walk this journey, we have extremely few examples, very, very few examples models that we can walk by. And one of the things that I think has slowed us is that we have just tried to copy models. We have tried, while we want to walk a unique journey, at the same time, we have based our projects, we have based our interventions into this on things which others have done or international agencies have suggested. Our own ability to sit down and design how we're going to do this has been quite low. Our research, and as you see in there, I am a scientist, so I'll be a bit biased on science in the remaining few minutes. If we do not invest in real research, our researchers have not engaged in research for development. That's R&D. Our research has been mostly to identify barriers, to identify effects, to identify, and we have invested very, very little into research and development, or we have not had a very, a policy and pathway that we are committed to developing this information in the research, which is going to help us on our way. So unless we are able to really engage, what are we going to ride on? If we are saying agriculture is something that we need to move, and if I can move here, we need to be building the people. The building of the people, the building of the workforce has not been in tandem, and we're not going to transform the country when people's mindsets and practices and work ethics are not oriented right. So I summarized this again then, that if we have, because development is about the people really, if we have a low quality labor, and this is our population, and we have a mostly subsistence mindset, it's not just the agriculture, but all our mindset, all the mindset of our managers is subsistence, as Pamela just said, and our education system is basically recycling the subsistence mindset. So we need a system, we need something to push that subsistence mindset out. And for me, this more than anything has slowed, because if people understand this, then we should be able to get to Vision 2040. With the people who are thinking the way we are thinking now, putting in more money will not push us further. Actually, we could have used less money than we have so far invested. So if we are going to cross that bridge, if we are going to begin to cross that bridge, then there is a lot of investment that should be made in the changes of the people, in the change of the mindsets. So when you just put resources in the same system, in the same people who think that way, we will be very, very slow. And this is how I summarized then the different sectors and how NDP, the Vision 2040, laid out all these areas. They were the barriers, they were the how we were going to move, and you can see that the vision is to move people out of certain sectors and into other sectors. Agriculture, as it is now, subsistence reducing, and industry coming. And you see this big arrow is increased research and development activities and the utilization of research and innovation products. And therein lies the main reason why we have not progressed the way we should have. And if we want NDP3 to be different in kind of the traction towards our goals, in moving towards what we want to be, we must go into research and development. Simply developing, depending on international policy guidelines and international project guidelines, we're not going to get there, because Vision 2040 kind of sets Uganda out of what would have been thought. There are certain things that are unique. And Fred talked about the education system, and of course, and COVID having an impact on the education system. Whereas it is sad that we have not continued, I'm kind of glad that COVID brought a stop to education activities, because everybody was yelling about how bad. I mean, when we had education going on, we were yelling it's not serving us. Now COVID has given us an opportunity. I'm afraid we are going to miss it because we are too focused on reopening the same education things which are not serving us. I want to tell you that one of my assignments during COVID has been to set up research and development for tools that help us fight epidemics. And I have one of the biggest inputs that we have had is mindset. The mindset of the entire research and education fraternity is not oriented towards research and development. It is oriented towards knowledge. It's oriented towards research for papers, for international, and it's not entirely their fault. Investment has been low. However, yes, in the last 1 minute, Apofia, yes, I see you. Yes, however, there is hope. The hope is what I can give two quick examples. When we have had focused research and development with a champion, and the two things that I have seen, or three things so far that have come out where we are changing and transforming to industrialization, there has been research and development championed by the head of state himself, but the lack of understanding in between, like, you know, in the entire civil service, finance will be questioning, the ministry that is responsible will be questioning and not supportive of this effort. The banana industrialization, the pivot, has developed products that we had never thought of, but the movement has been very, very slow. And the second one I can give is the one I'm heading, which was just started this year in April, basically, and we were given funds this financial year. We are about 5 months of implementation. And if I had the opportunity to present to you the vast progress that has been made in this time, it is worth like 5 years, because there is that concentrated engagement to change mindsets. Really, by early next year, we should be having some vaccines that we are testing. We already, this month, we are testing drugs that we have worked on. And if this works well, we are going to put this into industry. So if we can prove that model, then we will improve our movement of vision from just being paper to reality. Thank you. Apofia, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Monica. You have put on table quite a number of things that have set us thinking in a different direction, but I'll come to you with questions once we have heard from the other panelists. I want to encourage the panelists to please go to the Q&A section. There are a number of questions there and comments that you need to engage with from the attendees. Thank you again, Dr. Monica, for your presentation. I have a feeling some of the panelists are itching to respond to what you have put on the table. But before I call the next panelist, I want to call for the second poll question. Let's have the second poll question, and I encourage all of us to participate and engage in answering the question. How would you assess the relevance of Vision 2040 to ordinary Ugandans? How would you assess the relevance of Vision 2040 to ordinary Ugandans? Is it irrelevant? Many have heard about it but don't know what it means. Is it irrelevant? It is just another bureaucratic government program without real connection to Ugandans. Or is it relevant and a good guide to Ugandan entrepreneurs and external investors on where opportunities lie? Or you are not clear yourself on what Vision 2040 is all about. It's just hanging up there in the air. It's all word and you haven't really grasped it. So we need to have your assessment of the relevance of Vision 2040 to the ordinary Ugandan, not to the high and up and about people, but to the ordinary Ugandan. Is it irrelevant? Many have heard about it, but don't know what it means. Is it irrelevant? It is just another bureaucratic government program with no real connection to us Ugandans. Or is it relevant and a good guide to us and to entrepreneurs and external investors who are seeking opportunities? Or aren't you clear about it? We are doing great. Let me encourage even more of you to vote. Our voting percentage is still low. Let me encourage many more of you to vote so that we can know what the relevance level of Vision 2040 is. Your views will inform the paper that we are going to write about this area. Just a few more seconds and we will be done. There we go. 56% of you are saying that it is relevant and a good guide to entrepreneurs and investors. 31% are not clear, and that's a high number. They are not clear on what Vision 2040 is all about. I hope NPA is taking note. And 6% tie on saying that it is irrelevant. They have heard about it, but don't know what it means. And it's just another bureaucratic government program without real connection. Thank you very much for taking part in that poll. Let me now invite our second discussant, Dr. Asumani Guloba. Dr. Guloba is the Director of Development Planning at the National Planning Authority, before which he was Director of Research and Development Performance. He is a development practitioner possessing over 18 years of professional experience in addressing national development challenges. 4 of those years have been spent at the National Planning Authority, 5 with the World Bank in Uganda and Zambia country offices, and 10 with the Parliament of Uganda. He regularly lectures graduate students in economics and quantitative economics programs at Makerere University. Before joining the National Planning Authority, he was an economist in the macro and fiscal management global practice of the World Bank. There, he led or co-led and coordinated the World Bank's economic program and activities in Zambia. Before joining the bank, he worked as a principal economist at the Parliament of Uganda, where he was among the pioneer economists in Parliamentary Budget Office. During his professional span, he has had the privilege of working on key development issues, both in the public and private sectors. He has produced over 25 publications, 10 of which were published in reputable peer-reviewed international journals. Please welcome with me Dr. Asumani Golowa to speak to us. With that kind of background, I'm sure all of us are anxiously waiting to hear from you. Welcome, Asumani.
Thank you, Afofia. Again, let me take this opportunity to thanking CASO for organizing this, and for me, as the director in charge of development planning and National Planning Authority, I will start from the last question that you posed to the audience. And because of that question, I'm so happy to be here, because if most people don't know what we are talking about when you are talking about vision, search for us one way for us to make sure we bridge that information gap. And on that front, thank you very much. That said, I'm going to talk to mainly 5 issues, particularly in light with the first 2, by rectifying the issues that came from the first presentation from Fred. 1, whether NDP is COVID responsive. What I would say that NDP is COVID responsive. But lucky that as we are finalizing the NDP, that's when COVID came in. Indeed, we could have launched the plan a bit earlier if it wasn't for COVID, but we delayed it a bit for about 2-3 months in order to make sure it responds to COVID. And what happened when we realized that there was COVID, we took a bit of time and undertook a study that reviewed COVID and how it is going to inform the plan. The interesting things from this study is that we realized the finding from this study was that the plan that we had earlier, COVID, regardless of COVID, was still valid. The only issue that we needed to do is the way we sequenced it, which issues we prioritized became key. And it informed us a bit on prioritization, showing how agenda solarization was key, particularly addressing the basic needs of people and food in particular, so it became on the forefront. Issues related to import replacement and bubble, regard, we even had to deliver an import substitution. It also showed, it heightened the importance of digital transformation because digital solutions were required. The other thing that became key was the issue of environment and need to have recovery in tourism. That said, therefore, when we released the plan to a large extent was being informed by COVROC to departure from Freddy's presentation, was that there was limited private sector involvement in plan and implementation. I want to put this to clarify this, because one thing is that the main departure between NDP 3 from other NDPs was the heightened need, realization of privatization, private sector. Private sector is prioritized in NDP 3, and this is the main departure. Indeed, in NDP 3, we recognize private sector importance. One is that it provides 77% of all formal jobs. It provides 80% of the entire GDP of Uganda. It provides getting for investment from private sector, and because of that, NDP, the second objective out of the 5 objectives of NDP 3 is entirely on strengthening and enhancing this engine called the private sector. And we devote an entire program of NDP 3 to make sure that we harness this private sector. And not only that, is that as we are trying to harness this private sector, all the 18 programs in NDP in a way connected to supporting the private sector, but we have even one specifically for the private sector to sort out everything that the private sector would be facing. And here we see government has a key role to play. And here, the way we are looking at it from the current growth model is that when we unpack the private sector, you that the growth model that we have is unbalanced. It's mainly in one line corridor coming from Malaba to all the way to Katuna, and in between passing through Kampala, it's just one corridor. And government has a role to make sure it diversifies that corridor. In NDP3, we are looking at a triangle, and the only way you can be able to enforce the private sector to move into that triangle, to invest in Igulu, to invest in Moroto, in what the government has to get a way of crowding in and sorting out issues so that the private sector is able to move in those areas. To start my conversation on as I comment. Now, as I go forward, I'm left with 3 more things to talk to. I do recognize the challenges that Fred mentioned in his presentation. One thing I need to tell you is that if you unpack all these challenges, NPA will recognize them. Indeed, they are already in a literature produced by NPA in all our documents. We have several documents, including the plan, including the certificate of compliance, so several documents on our website. All these things will recognize them. The reason is that in the planning, for you to plan, you have to be realistic. You have to analyze the problem very well. The first step of having a plan is a good understanding the problem you are facing. So these issues Fred has put out there, I'm very happy that they are indeed in concurrence with what we are thinking. Issues related to the challenges in the subsistence sector, low gain for jobs, local government an uncoordinated approach to planning. These are issues you have diagnosed, and NDP. As I also responded to the commentary, which Fred posed with goals ambitious. And I have a mixed answer to this. It's a yes or no. In terms of a yes, it's a yes. But it could be no. It could be a yes if we continue on that trajectory. If we, as planners, we haven't learned from this. But if we have learned from this and we are trying to put goals in place to make strategies in place to make sure that we change what we have done from there. As a planner, you have to be ambitious and work towards making sure you deliver that ambition. So what we have done, I'll try to mention just 3 of them. One is that if you look at what we have learned from the past and what we are trying to change in order to make our ambitious goals deliverable, is the way budget is going to be aligned to delivering priorities. In our literature, past literature in NDP 2, we did mention areas where the budget wasn't aligned to our priorities in certificate of compliance. But going forward, we are working closer with Minister of Finance. Indeed, the next budget that is going to come out is being informed by the planning priorities in NDP. That's a departure that we need to take forward. The second thing that we have tried to learn is the issue of silo approach, uncoordinated approach to government delivery. And we believe this was also delaying our ambitious plans. So what we have introduced in NDP3 is a programmatic approach, and Freddie talked to it. We need to make sure we energize ourselves as government to make sure we focus on results and put government synergies around us delivering for these results. And that's something that we are strengthening public investment management. And the way you identify a project, implement it, monitor it, this whole issue is a game changer. And we believe with this, the projects, the way Fred put it rightly, in NDP2, the number of projects that we were able to execute to fruition were few. And this is something that we are hoping to sort out in NDP3 to be able to achieve our goals. That said, there's a question that came up from Fred, whether
yes.
if we don't realize all our goals. I want to also clarify on that, is that indeed in NDP2 and NDP3, the modeling that we have to these goals does not have oil. Oil, if it comes in, to be a bonus. If it came today, we'll achieve our goals much, much faster. It's that important. But in NDP3, we are looking at even other minerals. Of more importance is iron ore, which is a more game changer than even oil. So those are some of the things that. Lastly, the recommendations that Fred, the insight brought out by Fred came up, the issues related to first and foremost, I concur with all the recommendations that he has given because they're in line with NDP. Issues of us trying to prioritize science, investment in science, technology, and innovation is an entire program in NDP theory. Issues related to import, substitution, and replacement. We have a strategy in NDP theory, and we have developed even an action plan. There is a specific strategy in NDP theory to make sure we come to that. And we have a specific chapter on M&E and how we are going to use M&E to monitor for results, because in the programmatic approach that we have set out, M&E is very key, focus on results. For fear, in respect to time, the 10 minutes you have given me, I think, are over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Asuman, for that brief that gives us a bit more insight into what the NPA has been doing behind the scenes as part of preparation for national development and consideration of the pandemic. You have brought clarity into understanding the departure of NDP3 from NDP1 and NDP2 because of the emphasis on private sector as an important aspect in national development. Thank you so much. Before I call on our next panelist, let me call for our third poll question. I still encourage you to go to the Q&A and interact, both panelists and attendees. Go and interact. We have our third poll question. How do you think COVID-19 has impacted Vision 2040? How do you think COVID-19 has impacted Vision 2040? Is it positive? Like COVID-19 has revealed new opportunities for leapfrogging development in all sectors, and this should be embraced. Or is it minor? COVID-19 is just a little hiccup on the journey, we will be back on course. Or is it very severe? The vision is attainable, but some corrective measures need to be taken. Or is it very severe? The scale of disruption across sectors calls for a total reset to make the plan realistic. So what is the level? How far do you think COVID-19 has impacted our Vision 2040? It could be positive, with COVID-19 revealing new opportunities for leapfrogging development in all sectors, and this should be embraced. You could be thinking it's minor, with COVID-19 being just a little hiccup on the journey that we are taking, and we will still be back on course. Or it could be fairly severe, with the vision being attainable, but needing some corrective measures to be taken. Or it could be very severe, with the scale of disruption being so big that there is a call for a total reset to make the plan realistic. I am giving you a few more seconds to vote. I'm calling on more of you to vote. Our voting percent is still a bit low, it's below 50%. Let me encourage all of us to interact, because although this is not a scientific way of getting data, it gives a view on what the public really thinks, what is going on with our Vision 2040. So I'm calling it now, ending the poll right now. We have 39% of you saying that the disruption is very severe, is fairly severe, that the vision is attainable, but some corrective measures need to be taken. Followed by those who think it's positive, with COVID-19 having revealed new opportunities for leapfrogging development in all sectors, and that it should be embraced. And then 22% who are saying it's very severe and we need a total reset of the plan to make it realistic. And only 6% saying it's minor, it's a little hiccup, and our journey will soon be back on course. Let me encourage you as you vote to also put your thoughts in the Q&A. Why did you think it was very severe? Why did you think it was positive? So that we can engage even more and understand what your thoughts are. Thank you very much. Now, it is my pleasure to invite our third panelist, Dr. James Magara, to give us his take about our Vision 2040. Dr. Magara is a futurist with a Doctor of Strategic Leadership from Regent University, Virginia Beach, USA. He's a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership and Management from Uganda Christian University, Mukono. He is a Master of Science in Dental Prosthetics from University of Bristol, United Kingdom. And he has a Bachelor of Dental Surgery from Makerere University. He holds an Advanced Leadership Certificate from Haggai Institute in Hawaii, USA, and is an OCSID, having attended the OCSID Executive Leadership Training Course Certificate offered by the Institute for National Transformation and Sandulus African Leadership Training Certificate in Servant Leadership. Dr. Magara is a cherished voice on leadership in Uganda and beyond. He has spoken at leadership gatherings on 3 continents. His passion to see Africa's immense human capital put to use is evident in his well-researched and provocative book, Positioning Africa in the 21st Century, the Pivotal Role of Leadership and Think Tanks. This book is available in local bookshops. You can go and get yourself a copy, and is also obtainable via Amazon. Dr. Magara has been actively involved in raising the standard of leadership and education in Uganda and across Africa by raising, developing, mentoring, and equipping other leaders. Besides running a successful dental practice, he serves as International Deputy Director General of the Institute for National Transformation. He is part of the faculty that focuses on raising transformational leaders in Africa and among Africans in the diaspora. He was also involved in training and mentoring youth through the Uganda Youth Forum, where he served as board chairman for 12 years. Dr. Magara is currently the chairman, board of directors, Uganda Heart Institute, and chairman of the think tank, Center for Advanced Strategic Leadership, CASO, which is hosting us today. Welcome, James, to speak to the forum. Very welcome.
Thank you very much, Apophia, and thank you very much, Fred, for your paper, which has laid an excellent backdrop for us to hold this discussion. It was great listening to the chair of the National Planning Authority. It's a pity she couldn't stay with us because of other engagements, but it's wonderful to have Dr. Guloba on the call. And thank you for your clarity. I see you have a lot to say. We hope to hear, I want to hear more. Monica, thank you too for giving us that pictorial layout of Vision 2040. I'll have a few minutes to make some comments, and I'll make about 4 or 5 comments. One is about the question of ownership. I think the Vision 2040 is a very good document. It's a good roadmap. There are some challenges, I think, personally, in achieving it in time. We need a lot of help to get that to happen. One of the things that I think is critically missing is the element of ownership. In the corporate world, we know that when you have a vision, it's important that everybody in the system knows the direction you're going. It's like being on a bus and you're sure you're on the right bus, not ending up in a different direction. And when there is lack of ownership, we have a lack of traction. And I think there are things that would need to happen urgently to create a greater sense of ownership of this vision. If you went down to the villages or schools and asked where is Uganda headed, this should be something that any waking Ugandan should be. When you're waking up in the middle of the night, you can, recite. And a lot of work needs to go into that area because it would help bring alignment in even now in the politics. I listen to the political voices speaking, and they don't seem to have a sense of where we should be going. And yet we have an excellent document. So that's one point I'd like to make. There's a need for greater ownership that involves publicizing the vision, breaking it down. Most people will not understand the language that we use at this level, but this can be broken down into stories. Everybody understands the story. I've seen vision documents from other countries where they would put a very small document, but it's in a pictorial language and the main points are out there. So anyone out there, and of course the other thing is translating it into the languages that people would understand. So then there's a great need to create a greater sense of ownership. Using schools, this should be something that is in every school, so that the whole country has a sense of movement. And I think that is something we can attain. It's a good point now as we're at the midway point of Vision 2040. I think it's one of the things that I don't know whether NDP3 addresses it, but it's something that needs to be addressed. So that's number one. Number two was alluded to by, or actually talked about, so came up as a question, and that is a question of, the first one was ownership, the second is alignment. And that is really by the implementers. As Dr. Mbabazi mentioned, there is a challenge, and it was good hearing it from somebody who is actually working on the vision. We've got to address this challenge. I don't have the answers, but the public sector. One of the things that we've observed as we've had this is the 29th engagement this year on this platform, is operation in silos. And again, that was talked about by Dr. Mbabazi, whereby it looks like you have government ministries, departments, and agencies. Everyone, each of them is looking at their cut of the budget, what they will do. Sometimes they may be doing similar things, but there are no cross linkages. That has to be addressed. When you look at the working of an engine, every part must be working in tandem with the other. If you begin having engine parts moving in different directions, the car will not move. You're very likely to have an engine knock. So there is a great need for alignment, and I'm glad to hear that is being addressed because that is, the implementers are the engine. So the engine for this journey that we are taking as a country is really in the public sector. Now, we do hear the private sector has a very key role to play. Yes, I do agree. But the people who have the money, we pay our taxes, the ones who control the money, or even when we get loans, they're the ones who control the money. And they're the ones who control the policies. That is a very, very critical part of a journey. So if that part is not in alignment, then we cannot move. We cannot move as fast as we want to move. So the question of alignment has to be addressed. Now, the other aspect that I want to bring to our discussion is the use of our intellectual capabilities. It's wonderful that we have come to this point. We had a webinar where we talked about the role of think tanks, and in that webinar, we looked at the development of long-term planning, the history, going back to colonial days. And we know that for a number of years, we really didn't have any planning framework. We just picked up things that were, somebody in Washington wrote them, passed on to another person in the country, and that became what we're running on. So it's wonderful that we are now, as a country, beginning to think for ourselves. But we need to increase the number of people thinking. Universities, I do agree with Dr. Monica, talking about the lack of research. The research is a function of universities. There are also research centers, other research centers, but this has to again be addressed if we're going to really generate endogenous knowledge. Much of the research that goes on in our universities are funded from abroad, and it doesn't really. Of course, when you pay the researcher, you determine what the researcher will bring out. So a greater emphasis on placing of funds. I mean, this year has been an excellent example where we've seen that resources have been put on solving the problem we had this year. And look at what we've done. And we've gone as far as producing ventilators in the country. And now from what we heard from Dr. Monica, we are now testing drugs. Money has to go there. If there's no money put there, it's going to be difficult to drive that side of things. So public sector, the public ownership alignment of the public sector, think tanks, and universities. We have citizens in the country who, with all kinds of qualifications, and people have studied. In the past 20, 30 years, we have a lot of people who have done master's degrees, and now we need to translate that to benefit the country. Deliberate efforts have been made to tap this intellectual resource so that things, we can include, the more heads you have, the finer the product will be, so long as that thinking is focused and to bring some results. I think it was mentioned about evaluation. I think that is key as well. We know when we do things in the private sector that when you've done something, you've got to evaluate it. And you've got to evaluate it very critically and learn from the mistakes and also the good things that have happened. I'm not sure we are properly evaluating government performance. A performance evaluation of government, I know it's great with the roadmap we have this 5 years and there's an agency that does that, but I'm talking about government agencies themselves. It's something that I would love to hear more about. It's sensitive politically, but it's imperative if we're going to improve, and especially if public administration is going to improve, because public administration is the implementer. If they don't want to be evaluated properly, then we've sentenced ourselves to mediocrity. So that is a point that I thought I'd bring on the table as well. Now, my last point, Apophia, is a question of foresight. It was good to hear what Dr. Gulova said about when they saw what was happening, they began to see that this thing that began in Wuhan, China, might have global implications. They put on some brakes, which was very good. And then they were able to sit back and assess what is happening. So that is wonderful to hear. Now, we need to take it much further. And again, it was good to know that there was a risk aspect attached to NDP3. We now need to actually move to replacing scenarios. This has been one, unexpected. These are called wild cards. When you plan, there are some things you do not expect at all that come in and interfere. They are wild cards, but if they are positive, they're called benestrophes. Beautiful things that come that you didn't expect, but they come and make your journey much easier. We need to look more at the wild cards. We've just seen a pandemic. What if there's a war? What would happen? We saw how China was locked up for just a few months, and the whole world was on its knees because China is the manufacturing center of the world. So what would happen if something like a war? And by the way, interestingly, this year there were some skirmishes between China and India at their borders. What if a full-scale war blew out and we could not get anything from China? Are we ready for that, or will we be scrambling around? So taking the planning to another level and looking at different scenarios, we now know that we have a young population. What is the scenario? How do we build the scenario? Yesterday, I drove through a part of town and I was just looking at all the babies crawling around and the young people, and I'm wondering, in 10, 15 years, all these are going to be teenagers. Are we ready for this? So scenario planning has to become a very robust part of our looking at the future so that we can see multiple scenarios, because the future is not one, the future has several scenarios. We want to move it towards the best scenario, but we also need to be ready for other scenarios. And we can do this by simulating situations and looking at, if this happened, then if there's another lockdown and the airports are closed, then what will we do? You know, where else can we go? This is how we think all the time when we're solving our own problems. We now need to scale that up to a national level. So I think I'll stop my comments there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and we will look forward to the further discussion taking place. Over to you, Apofia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Magara. You have pointed out quite a few things and thrown a few more fruits into the basket that we need to look at in order to achieve our Vision 2050. I'm sure Fred will have a thing or two to say in response to your suggestions. We will be going into our discussion, but I want to encourage you to please comment about this webinar using our Twitter hashtags, CASOWebinar and Thrive Vision 2040. Please use your Twitter accounts to tweet about this webinar. We are also broadcasting live on the CASO Facebook page. You may check us up out there, and you could post your comments there as well. Before we go into our discussion, let us have the fourth poll question. Let us have poll question number 4. Yes. What do you consider to be the main challenge to the attainment of Vision 2040? What do you consider to be the main challenge to the attainment of Vision 2040? Is it lack of public support because of ignorance about Vision 2040? Is it disjointed institutions that operate in silos? Is it a matter of resource constraints? Or do we have unrealistic targets in our Vision 2040? What is it? What is our main challenge in attainment of our Vision 2040? Are we lacking public support because of ignorance about Vision 2040? The public is not much aware of Vision 2040 and what it's all about. Or are all the sectors and institutions disjointed in their approach to operationalizing this plan? They're operating in silos. Or is government not putting enough resources into achieving Vision 2040? Or is it simply that right from the beginning we have unrealistic targets in our Vision 2040? What is it? What is it? What is it that is stopping us from attaining, that is making us slow in our progress? Let me encourage you to answer the poll a few more seconds and then we will be done with it. But the percentage of voting is still low. Let me encourage all of you to please take part in the poll so that we can get to know your opinion on what is the main challenge. What is the key challenge in our attaining Vision 2040? We will now end the poll there. Thank you very much. 67% of you are saying it's because of disjointed institutions that operate in silos. We are lacking a coming together. Each of the institutions and sectors are operating on their own, which inhibits our attainment of Vision 2040. And 22% say it's lack of public support because we don't know what it is all about. And then 6% tie on saying it's both a resource constraint and unrealistic targets. Thank you very much for taking part. Now we will go into our general discussions where we will look at your questions that you have posted in Q&A and your comments and other issues of interest. Let me begin with Dr. Monica. Dr. Monica, With hindsight, having seen all that has happened due to COVID-19, and considering that this could right now be an opportunity for Uganda to rethink her development agenda, as well as her investment priorities. You have mentioned quite a number of areas in the slide that you gave, which showed the map poverty and then the future. You showed a number of areas which are quite many. Are those, do you still think with hindsight that those, all of them are the top priority sectors for funding that could propel the national agenda forward, or are there priority of priorities? Are there some specific ones you could pick out, like 2, 3, that are really top that should receive more urgent funding? Dr. Monica.
Thank you very much, Apofia. And we realized that we have some sectors, they are all good for the economy and they play very well when you have, when you are at peace. But the problem is when you rely on those sectors solely or in a big way, then in the end, should there be a disaster, you don't have anything to depend on. So we need to reevaluate how we layer. How do we layer the development? How do we layer the focus? How do we layer so that other things are standing on top? Because we are still very vulnerable. Our undeveloped state makes us quite vulnerable. I would like to give the example of China. China suffered from this disease earlier than us, but because China had a buttress, their bottom line was quite good because they had things which could not be removed by COVID. They could not be just nullified by COVID, not in the long term. In fact, the disease became globally, the more China became relevant to the rest of the world. And people, because China was the producer, the manufacturing center, not only for consumables or high-end products, but also for machinery and what feeds into production chains. So we needed to go back and rethink. And if Apofia, you'll allow me, I will show one more slide from my presentation, which is very, very, I'm not sure whether it is there.
Yes,
I'll show just one. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Yes. So when we did, how can I see my showing of slides? Yeah. When we did Vision 2040, that's the slide I want to show. When you go through Vision 2040, it divides our sectors into these 4 chambers. And we had the primary growth sectors, then we have complementary sectors, and then we have social sectors, and we have enabling sectors. So we need to go back and see, especially over NDP 1 and NDP 2, at any one time, you need to focus and you need to focus on particular sectors. And for me, one of the sectors that we need to totally rethink is education, because developing the people is foundational to everything else, because they are both producers and consumers of development. If you have a people who don't appreciate development, even if they are not contributing to it, they will also sabotage the development. I think you've seen of recent when people are a bit angry, they light tires on the roads and damage the. So one of the things, the way we have moved over the past NDPs, I have not seen that that education that is geared towards producing researchers, producing people who will appreciate. So I don't know why we don't have development studies right from primary school. Why this Vision 2040 is not part of the curriculum, such that a kid is growing up, because most of the children in primary now will finish university and will be entering into this. Why isn't it part of a core part of our curriculum? So we needed to reevaluate. I know at one point we put a lot of effort on oil and gas. Maybe we need to rethink a little bit of that, especially we need to be re-evaluating in the view of where we are growing. So we needed to rethink. And then there is also easily harnessable science. I want to tell you about the economy of pathogens. The economy of pathogens. We have always thought that because we have Ebola, we have malaria, we have all these diseases, for us, we have taken them like problems for which we are dependent on solutions from outside. What if we flip that around and deal with these surface things that we have? And China turned their pathogen into a huge economic transformation. And for me, I think that that comes with developing the thinking of the people. We need to focus more on think tanks. I never saw think tanks in Vision 2040 strategically positioned. So we needed to refocus on think tanks, to reconfigure the people we have, but also to really, we need to focus more onto human development. We need to put it we need to fast track human development. And then number two, we need to look at the opportunities we have now, and harness those opportunities so that they buttress the rest of the sectors which we are developing.
Thank you very much. Before I let you go, I want to ask you a question about research. One of your slides was showing that we need to do more research and also link it into development, which is yes, but there has been a public concern, yes, that we increase research and development activities. There has been a concern that a lot of research has actually been done and has not been utilized. Is it a question of more research, or is it a question of taking more of what has already been done and processing it more into innovation and products, utilizing it for development? Also, Dr. Magara talked about it. After you, I will call upon him to also make a comment on the same. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you very much. I have flashed that slide there. And I have put that research actually is increased research and development, because that's the whole research value chain. One of the mistakes we have made, as Dr. Magara also mentioned, is we did not deliberately sit down and say, okay, what information is there about the issues that we want to do? Then engage that relevant stage of research and development and translate these things ourselves, own this ourselves, and translate this into things that we own and develop priorities. So otherwise, we are doing research, we are calling it now, the way I communicate to my researchers now is there's research which is a sink and there is research which is a fountain. So we have been doing a sink research which is dependent, you know, every year you want a grant, you want what, you produce papers, you publish, travel all over the world to present, but there is nothing to show. Now we are taking all this knowledge, which is already developed all over the world, just doing research to finalize it, to go to a product. That's where we need to focus now. Research and development, that is R&D, that's conversion of knowledge into products and then channeling those into industry. It has to be a complete rethink, total rethink. The about 100 scientists that I work with, it's ongoing work in the progress to reconfigure the mindset. You always have to remind them what's the product, and that is a clause we are always repeating. So we should not just go into research. An example is Narrow. Narrow has done a lot of research and they have sustained the agriculture industry. However, the translation of the increased productivity, they have done a lot of research and come out products to productivity. They have overcome diseases, they have done that, but the next level of research to industrialize those products is still very low. It's still very low. So we are still largely, we have increased the production like of coffee, but we are exporting it raw. So the value addition, the value to the channel into this, where we want to move from industry as small to big industry. Otherwise, we are going to import industries which are accompanied by pollution and low-end jobs. And I worked with one industry where we're producing products, and literally the only thing Ugandans were doing is packaging the products. So if we don't want to be caught up in that, and we want to bring industrialization, that one serves us for now, but we need to make sure that we are developing research and development with human resource. And it's not just this research of publications and what, we have a huge number of people like that, but they need to reconfigure their mindset. They need funding from Uganda to develop those industries. With champions, yes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Magara, do you have anything to add on that, or has Monica covered it?
Well, I'll just a sentence on two. I'm very much in agreement with what Monica said. Actually, she's put it very, very well. I remember when I went for my master's degree in the United Kingdom, one of the things that my professor asked me is, what area do you want to research on? And I didn't have any. Now, really, universities should be positioning people towards being problem solvers, not just getting papers. So they said, no problem, the university has a project, you can join it. So I did a research, we discovered one or two things, and I found out in the course of research that we were being sponsored by an industry, by a company. So the beneficiaries of that research project were the university and the company. And by the end of that course, I told myself, I'm not doing any postgraduate training again unless I can do something that can be made use of. And that is an approach we need to have. There's a lot of funding coming to research different research projects. But the relevance, if you were to take all those things and say, how relevant is it to our advancement? Okay, just ask a question. How relevant is this research to where we are going as a country, Vision 2040? The results will be quite interesting. So I want to agree with Monica that we've got to look at research as far as moving us to the Vision 2040 is, and also it's imperative that we see it as a priority, and that means that government will put, as long as we don't fund research, we can't expect to get results that will be beneficial. I think that will be my comment.
Thank you very much. Just before I let you go, CASO exists to promote the application of critical thought leadership to the governance of Africa's key sectors for national transformation. If today the government gave CASO the opportunity and resources to lead the intervention into any sector, which intervention would that be and why? The critical one, which one would it be?
Well, one of the things that we identified at the very beginning was the mindset change, education. And when CASO was launched last year, you remember that we spent almost a week. Actually, we spent, it was a week, about a week, having first of all, a workshop on education, and then we held a conference that was looking at education for the future. If you will, those of you who may have seen that, or if you haven't seen it, the documents are available. We looked at the importance of education towards securing our future. Actually, the theme of the conference was education and African futures. And we addressed the fact that the education system has to radically change. That if we don't change the mindset, I mean, the example's already been given. Yesterday, I was driving along the Entebbe Express Highway, beautiful road. It has cut down travel times by more than half. One time it took me 3 hours to move from Entebbe to Kampala. You can now do that in 30 minutes. But I looked along the roadside and I discovered that the fencing has been, in some places, has been removed. People who live by the roadside don't appreciate the value of having that express highway. There was a time I found cows grazing in the road reserve. How have they got in there? Now, this illustrates a population that does not appreciate advancements. You'll build all the nice things, the nice roads, put in transport systems, they'll destroy them. So we've got to change the mindset. And the best way to do that, of course, the family is the best, but there's too many dysfunctional families in this country. Schools offer a very good opportunity. So to answer your question, Apophia, without thinking too much, that would be a major contributing point. The only thing is that the results won't appear in 5 years. They won't be ready for the next election. Results will appear in 20, 30 years. But if we're talking about Vision 2040, which is 20 years away, we've got to do that. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me go to Dr. Gulova. Dr. Gulova, our Think Peace presenter told us that there have been observable commitments by the government to protect and support local industries, to produce for the local market and even for export. And that there has also been a call for enhancing the local content and support science to drive innovation. Considering that the pandemic really locked us in and forced us to be inward looking, do you think there is a role in all this planning for our Jua carries, those people down there in Katwe who innovate all sorts of things at a local level? Is there a role for such, the ordinary Ugandan trying to innovate things? And how can this nation harness their potential?
Thank you, Apophia. Before I go to answer that question, I want to just say one or two things first. One, with COVID, COVID is a crisis. And with any crisis, there is an opportunity. The question that we need to sort out is whether we're able to harness that opportunity. Because it's only under crisis that you're able to do some things that you wouldn't do otherwise. It's only the same that you do few things that people would have thought about being as crazy, and then everybody thinks this is a smart way to do it. So we need to look for these opportunities and we take them forward. And one of the issues that now are coming out clearly is the potential, to come to your question, the potential of us harnessing the local industries, the Jua carries, and making sure that we harness them to be able to drive this economy. It's no game changer. It is almost similar to a question somebody else asked about today. The people beyond the subsistence sector that we talked about as a challenge, the urban dwellers, the urban poor who are employed in low-earning jobs. These are the Jua carries and innovators. Now, in NDP3, we have a specific program to this effect. It's called the Science and Technology and Innovation Program. But we also have another one which is not which is not specifically to the Jua carries. We have one of digital transformation. For me, beyond the Jua carries and the digital transformation is looking to our younger graduates. Some of them are not even graduates. Some of them are just technology savvy younger people who are very good at computers, who are very good at innovating. And we are hoping that we can harness a few innovation hubs, particularly IT innovations for every region, like the one that we have in Intinda, where you don't need to have a degree and you are very good at technology savvy, you can go in. Around the Jua carries, the specific support that is coming in under the Science and Technology program, in particular, trying to put in a right framework to recognize where these people are. Because the framework already they have in the government, even if you wanted to support them, you have no way of recognizing them. So putting an innovation conducive hub framework in place in the government is the first thing that we need to do. That is able to put the patents right, not only in science, but in music and everywhere. That's able to recognize who is doing what and where. That is able to support them wherever they are, is the first process to go. And it's because of that a full ministry was set up of Ministry of Science and Technology to be able to put that framework in place. Once that framework has been put in place, there are a few things that have been put that are out there. The Industrial Institute of Research that is able to harness some of these dual-carries out there, and also trying to get a war formalizing them. Now, what is how we are this support is coming in? I'm sure you have heard about ENYOGA. ENYOGA is basically trying to look for these people, not only the dual-carries, but even people in hairdressing salons who have been struggling, and government is coming into as a hand to play so that it is able to handhold them to be able to build their capacity to be able to improve what they are doing, wherever they are doing it. That's a key area that would. Lastly, contrary to what you asked me, is I want to agree with both Dr. Monica and Dr. Magara on the issue of education. And in NDP, we believe that if there's an area we need to transform, it's education. The challenge that we have had is that NPA did a bit of study recently. We did an evaluation of UPE, and within that evaluation, there is a specific study we did on curriculum. There's something interesting that we find in this, that when you unpack the curriculum of Uganda, it is very good at building, making people learn, making people be innovators, making people think. But when you look at how this is practiced in reality, the way we practice it is that instead the examining of this curriculum, it focuses more on rewarding people for cram work. You see, every time you do we have a national exam, the best schools are those ones who are able to produce A's, and the examination is mainly based on how somebody was able to remember. The curriculum itself, if you unpack it, it has a third level soft skills. It has a third how somebody is able to think and it has a third how you're able to memorize. So we need an examination way which is able to examine all these three facets. And that's what we are pushing for in terms of education. But more importantly, also, we are proposing under education in NDP3 to make sure that our graduates are able to be trained to be able to use technical skills and to be able to learn a few things of patriotism. And the proposal that we are having here is that instead of us going, having a longer vacation that we normally have before 6 and several breaks, every person before they go to university, we need to introduce in a technical skilling course that is able to be tied around with national guidance and ties down with what Dr. Monica was talking about. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. That seems to answer Susan Achen's question on, she was saying that the think piece highlighted the fact that the bulk of the population is still engaged in the subsistence economy, yet significant economic progress has been made. But how can this opportunity to thrive? I will add on this question that you talked about a planner having to be very ambitious and trying to achieve that ambition, but could there be over ambition maybe? Because we seem as a nation to consistently plan and underperform. For example, our goal this time is to increase average household incomes and improve the quality of life of Ugandans. And yet we see a large proportion of households, about 70%, still in the subsistence economy. We see insufficient creation of quality and gainful jobs in the economy, especially for the youth. We see cost of electricity higher than average, higher than what an average Ugandan consumer can afford. Isn't it high time we reduced on our ambition and set our targets much lower where we can really achieve them?
Again, Afofia, thank you. I think for me to be able to answer that question, I need almost an entire presentation. but I will attempt to
attempt 2 minutes only.
I'll attempt to do a little bit of justice in 2 minutes, but I'll tell you, these issues you have talked about is what keeps us awake as planners. Basically, the first way of planning is to recognizing the problem. If you recognize the problem very well, the next is how do you address that problem? And we recognize the problem subsistence sector, we recognize the issue of low gainful jobs are available. And definitely NDP3 is an attempt to make sure we address those issues. Around the subsistence sector, we are trying to address it on 2 fronts. The first is to sort out where these people are where is the subsistence sector. It's mainly informal and it's mainly in agriculture sector, and they are largely youth actually, and women for that case. Now, knowing that, what are we trying to do? Is to make sure that at least the productivity, the incomes they are earning from where they are now improve significantly. And what we are doing, these are many people in agriculture. When they produce very well, the market is not available. Sometimes when the weather is not good for them, there's a drought and what. So what we are, they're also not organized. So we are trying to unpack the whole agro-industrialization as a program and unpacking the entire value chain of agro-industrialization. The characteristic of these people is that majority of them have small lands, meaning that if they go to, you want to commercialize them individually without proper technologies, they would do to the way you group them, for them to be able to get affordable financing, for them to be able to get right food technologies, for them to be able to produce for the market. So then we unpack issues related to post-harvesting, issues related to processing. You tie them to a processing which they could own, and then entirely to the market and import replacement. That's the approach that we are taking. And if you sort that out, you'll be almost halfway done with providing gainful jobs. The second approach that we are proposing is that majority of them are not in subsistence, not by choice. If you give them another job, they will be able to go through that. So meaning that we are trying to make sure that we provide these other avenues, if options for them to go into. And that's why NDP3 is talking about resource-led industrialization, using the current resources that we have to be able to give these people in the subsistence another option if they so chose to leave agriculture. So we are talking about first agro-based industries, but even mineral-based industries around our industrial parks. And as a country, we are blessed. And if we provided these, you'll be able to deliver the jobs for the youth that are looking for these jobs. The issue of whether we are too ambitious, I still believe we are not, as long as you do the right things that we have talked to. It's an issue of implementation, and going forward, we are trying to sort out these issues proactively to make sure in NDP3, the pitfalls, we have learned a lot from NDP1 and NDP2, the pitfalls that we had are ironed out in order to achieve the ambitions you have set out to achieve. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Gulova. Now let me go to our Think Piece presenter, Fred. In our planning processes, it was envisaged that we would be able to transform the country from a upper middle one within 30 years. And it was projected that Uganda would attain lower middle income status by 2017, progressing to upper middle income status by 2032. It was also further projected that Uganda would attain the status of a first world country in 50 years. Are we dreaming? Putting one of your questions back to you, were the targets too ambitious? Could you try to answer that one for us?
Thank you very much, Aya, for throwing the question back to me. I listened to the panelists, and I think they've done justice to the piece in discussing the piece. They have shared their perspectives. Some have painted a very optimistic picture. I say, no, this is actually achievable if we, do the right things. I still believe, and again, looking back at some of the things, some of the assumptions that were underpinning the vision and the strategy attainment, which haven't been done. I still think we are ambitious, especially in NDP3, where we are looking at NDP2, and like we said, less than 50% of the core projects have been implemented, and some of those that have been done are in very early stages, and we are midway through. The impact of COVID has hit us at the time of NDP3 at the midpoint. So already we are behind schedule, and then we are getting into a COVID situation whose impact is not just going to hit 1 year, but we know that the impact is likely extended. It is also true that we rely on foreign partners to invest with us in our plans. Their economies are shrinking. They are also being hit. Where are we getting the funds to actually invest and deliver on some of the projects? Like I indicated in the think piece, part of this, the strategy was also based on the fact that one of the assumptions was that we would be growing at a steady rate of 8.2%. Our GDP would be growing at a rate of 8.2%. Even before COVID hit, we were not necessarily growing at that. Questions. I think we are on the right track, like Dr. Pamela said, and Dr. Glover has also, alluded to this. We have fantastic plans. It is good that in NDP3 we're talking about household incomes that we want to focus on, because that's very critical. But there are many questions that I think we need to answer. So are we overly ambitious? I think we are overly ambitious. Like they say, numbers don't lie. The numbers are telling a different story. I think we also need to ask ourselves questions around, it's one thing to have the fantastic plans. When we look at the spend, is it really in line with, the planning that we are talking about? That is something that we need to step back and ask. When we come back and like this year, we've had into, I think we are on the right track. It's good that we are focusing on the households. It's good, like the panelists have said, these are things that I think we have more questions to answer. It's good to be hopeful, but like I say, hope is not a strategy, and we certainly need to have the right things. I say castles, yes, are meant to be put the right foundations under this 14. Thank you very much.
Indeed, I like that. Hope is not a strategy. In the think piece, Fred, you pointed out, I want to remain at the ordinary Ugandan level. In the think piece, you pointed out that about 80% of Ugandans are disconnected from the formal economy and live at subsistence level. So in your view, what should be done to bring the aspirations of Vision 2040 to meet those of the ordinary Ugandans? What are, excuse me, what are the quick, two things that should be considered in that aspect?
Okay. So what I talked about was especially alluding to the fact that statistics are good, but statistics can also hide a lot of things. So we have made progress on one hand in the GDP per capita, and one might say we could actually hit our, which is still verified, still 10 times away, 9,500 target GDP per capita. But when you go back and 80% of your population is in agriculture, which is contributing only 21% to the GDP, it means that you're still having a large part out. What do I think we can do? One, I think we need to address issues around unemployment. We need to seriously think through some of those. I like that government is talking about the Myoga, kind of focus. Question is, how can we support the SME sector, which is a very large employer within the sector, within the government? How can we increase money and skilling and the entire framework, looking at the ecosystem of the SME sector? I think that is one of the other areas that we need to look at. And seriously ask ourselves questions, especially in the mid to long term. How do we address the education space and harness the demographic dividend? We have about 28 million people under 18 years. There will be about 76 million in 10 years. They present us a wonderful opportunity. However, if we don't tap into them right now and do the right things, then they are going to be a burden in the future. So those are some of my quick thoughts that I'll put down.
True. Thank you very much. Let me go back to James. Dr. Magara, the pandemic has forced nations to be more inward-looking rather than outward. Do you think that because of this season, nations, and Uganda in particular, have now learned their lessons, are now moving to more self-reliance? And from your experience with the Castle think tank so far, do you think there has now been created space for genuine engagement with the government on initiatives that advance the nation? Is that space there now?
Thank you very much, Apofia. I just can't resist making a comment on whether we are too ambitious or not.
Okay.
I did a study with the International Futures Model, which seemed to project. It's the biggest network on computers that looks at a number of different factors when you're looking at the future. Factors the number of things, and it did indicate that we are behind. We were probably not going to hit our 2040. But I'd like to agree with Dr. Glover that I would rather aim high and get 70% of what I'm aiming for, than aim at 20% and get all of it and pat myself on the back. I think it's a good thing to stretch ourselves. Some things we've got to be realistic as well. I do appreciate, and I'm aware that I think the National Planning Authority has done some studies with the International Futures Model as well. There are some things that may be out of hand, but we need to push ourselves. Now back to your question about whether COVID has opened up space. I think it has, because you see, if you don't meet a challenge you can't solve, you usually won't listen. It's been very opportune for us at the Castle think tank to start these webinars at a time when everyone was looking for solutions. If you remember the time of the lockdown in March, schools were closed. We came down to people staying at home, totally unprecedented. There were very few voices. I mean, the newspapers are now active again, but there were very, very few voices in the news. At one point I wondered, where have the politicians disappeared to? They should be giving us answers, because no one had answers. So at that point, if you come up and you're proposing answers, people will listen. And I think that's the opportunity we stepped into. And we've had a very good year in terms of reaching out to people. And we've had people coming to have these engagements. So I personally believe that the challenge has opened up space for us to think. And even those who were not open to hearing other voices have listened. As things begin to appear to be normalizing, we get back to where we were. But we need to really use this to ask questions. And now even the developed countries, there have been two major things hits. One was the financial crunch. Remember how we used to be lectured to on our economy? The lectures have gone down because they had a crisis that hit them at the heart of the economy, Wall Street in 2008. Now there's a challenge which has hit the whole medical systems around the world. People don't have answers. So it's an opportunity for those who would want to be willing to work with their brains and put forward ideas. They may not be listened to, but at least they will be looked at. So I think there's a great opportunity we have before us. I hope I've answered your question, Apofia.
Yes, yes, you have, and thank you very much. Let me move to Dr. Asumani. As an economist, how do you explain to an ordinary Ugandan the apparent disconnect between the economic growth figures and household poverty, where over 70% are outside the formal economy? How do you explain that disconnect to us ordinary Ugandans? What should a Ugandan do to benefit from opportunities and developments in the economy? There seems to be a disconnect. We hear these rosy figures of economic development and such and GDPs. And as ordinary Ugandans, we look at ourselves and we are stuck in our poverty. There is a disconnect. How do you explain that to us so that we can understand it?
Thank you once again. You have taken me to a field where I want to be because I'm a teacher. So you have taken economists. It's a very interesting question because for you to understand the disconnect between GDP growth numbers and poverty, again, you go back to what Fred said. The statistics and averages can lie because GDP is an average. So the average can mask a lot of disparities. But if you go and unpack a bit further, to unpack the growth number, you need to unpack what is contributing to this growth. So the disconnect comes from what, again, Fred did allude to. Agriculture employs about 75% of Ugandans and only contributes 20% to GDP. So that's why the disconnect comes in. So basically the GDP growth you are getting, the 20% of that GDP growth is being shared by about 70 to 80% of Ugandans. So the only way you can move this disconnect is to make sure that where the majority of Ugandans are is where GDP should be coming from. And that's why when you see naturally from planning, when we prioritize agro-industrialization, it is coming from that kind of thinking, that if we are to have broad-based incomes and broad-based, and it ties down to the question that you proposed earlier of subsistence, what we are trying to do about that, and I answered to it. And basically, that's the approach that we are taking in planning to make sure we address that, we balance that growth to make it broad-based, to make sure majority of growth is coming from where the majority of Ugandans are, and every Ugandan, in a simple way, has a little bit in their pockets than they have. And that's the focus of NDP3. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Monica. Dr. Monica, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed vulnerabilities in the health sector globally. The Ugandan public and private sector is frequently criticized for, we prefer foreign health services over Uganda's health services. And yet there has been no access to these global health services for almost a year. Do you believe that the government has learned a lesson about this anomaly? And do you anticipate a shift in our planning and execution?
Thank you very much, Apofia. Sorry, my background is a bit dark because my electricity has gone off, so I don't have light. So I think before I answer that, allow me to just make a comment on something about education, which seems to be central. I remember in the 1990s when the country was trying to recover and rebuild food production, there was a program called ARTP. It was a World Bank funded program. Now I'm referring to this in line with what we have observed, that in terms of science, especially production, narrow and the agriculture sector is the area where we have really used science. Now, I wanted to propose to CASO and to my fellow panelists is that there was something done, which is possibly an approach that we can look at. Whereas in education, we went a lot wholesome to make sure that people have primary education, they have basic education. The ARTP program started from the top and built capacity and then started moving downwards. So I am thinking that for us to transform the education sector, we also need to transform the educators. The reason why we start moving in the same circles and we can't change our education is because the thinkers into education are coming from the same pool. If we had a strategic program that develops the educators at the top, and then we shall meet, it's like clouds meeting steam from the ground. We shall have that bipolar approach. There needs to be a special program to develop the education sector from upstairs, develop the experts, develop the people, and then we begin infusing that from up into the education system. Then coming to the health sector, I think COVID for me, it's a pity it is killing people, but COVID has presented us with a lot of opportunities. There are so many illusions that we had. There were people who just had a mindset that everything Ugandan is not right. And at the moment, everybody is at the mercy of this same Ugandan system. And one of the opportunities that it has given us is that our top policymakers have interacted with the Ugandan health system. They have seen the good, and they have seen the ugly, and they have seen the bad. So I think we shall be able to talk better. One, there is a lot more in the Ugandan health system than is appreciated by even our policymakers, because they hardly interact with that system. But secondly, there is no understanding and empathy when the implementers in the health system approach the policymakers for resources to develop the system. And I think that moving forward, it will be the interest of every single person in this country. So it presents an opportunity of exposure, and also hopefully will present an opportunity for us to harness the future. Because now we know that if we have a different, another crisis, we are not going to depend on our own system. I'm not sure that I'm still online.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I want to move on to Fred. Mr. Chaka, there is a question for you in the chat, that how can local governments be empowered to exploit opportunities in their resource basket? Fred Chaka, that it is in their resource basket in order to thrive in post-COVID era. What do you say about that?
Thank you very much for the question. I think one of the things we need to think through when it comes to the local governments, like I alluded to in the think piece, the service delivery goes through these spaces. A bulk of the service delivery, I think it's about 90% of the service delivery, I stand corrected around the actual statistic, but the budget allocation to that space is about 11.4%. And that in itself is relevant. Are we putting enough to make this local service, local governments productive and ultimately bring the services close to the people? I think there is opportunity in that front. The other is we need to think, even as we create these local governments, are they viable? And if we have not viable, let's tell them. We've already seen that a bulk of the funding, even a bulk of the 11.4 that goes there, goes into salaries. It's not really going into production. Can we channel some of these funds to production areas within these areas, within government spaces? About the revenue generation and revenue sharing model, not necessarily the detail, but I think what we see in here is an opportunity for us to, it's an opportunity for us to rethink how we go about it, how we put services, because as we put the funds in production, sorry, I seem to have off.
Yes, I could no longer hear you.
Yes, I had dropped off.
Could you wrap it up?
So that's really what, let us rethink our local government model, put the right resources, but also if they're not viable, especially economically, let's see if it is worth it creating some of this. Because we don't have enough resources to get into everything, and yet we're putting monies in spaces which are not as productive. I don't know if I answer your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fred. We are now going into our closing moments, and as we draw to a close, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give us your last parting shot in exactly 1 minute. I will begin with Dr. James Magara. What have you to say?
Okay, thank you very much, Apophia. It seems the rain is interfering with the network over here. I hope you can hear me. I think this pandemic has given us an opportunity to, as it were, wake up. Imagine you're a traveler in a bus, and you wake up, you got into the bus perhaps when you're asleep, and then you wake up, and one of the first questions you need to ask is, where are we going? Where is this bus headed? If this bus is taken to be Uganda, we have a destination called 2040, but there are passengers who have no clue where the bus is going. And once that is the case, you can have a lot of commotion in the bus. They can even begin doing things that will jeopardize us reaching the journey. So it's great. I think we have a great destination. We've got a great roadmap. It's very important that we get everyone pulling in that direction. People understanding, okay, take your seat, the bus is going in direction X, and each of us has a part to play in getting it safely there. Maybe a better illustration would be a ship, but a ship is not well understood. If we're going through stormy waters, everyone on the ship needs to be playing their part to make sure the ship doesn't sink. Right now, when you see what's going on, it looks like some actors will make this ship sink. So okay. I do hope that as we enter NDP3, we can get alignment and ownership of the vision. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Monica, what is your parting shot?
Thank you. I hope you can still hear me. Rain is doing on the internet the same thing. My parting moments is, first of all, thank you, Castle, for organizing this think tanking. I think this is a good trend for us to be able to deliver the outputs of R&D, of Vision 2040. We must own research and development so that we undergird every development and we don't put it on a faulty foundation of assumptions, of observations from elsewhere, but we really need to look at our priorities engage in development of products that are resilient, that will not be blown away by future shocks like COVID. And this should include a lot of think tanking. I got it from Dr. Magara, and when I started the platform for the research for COVID tools, I put up a think tank, and I have seen the benefits even in this short term. The second thing we must focus on is we need to totally rethink our human resource development and have a two-pronged approach. We need to communicate the vision. If we just have a few people owning. So thank you so much, and we'll continue the interaction.
Thank you, Dr. Monica. Let me call upon Dr. Asmani. Your last word, please.
Thank you again, Afofia and the Castle team for bringing us together to have this conversation. I'll talk to three things in my final minute. One is let us not waste this crisis. There are several good things that we could do from this crisis, things we never thought about before. Things like rationalizing expenditures, things like in the past we have had good plans, but we are not able to implement them. Now is the time to address those impending issues that have been failing us. Two, our budgets need to be more aligned to priorities, and this is also an opportunity. Now that we don't have resources, our donors don't have, now is the time to cut our coat to our size. We need to remove wastefulness to make sure that we deliver the priorities. Lastly, from what Dr. Monica said, we need to rally the whole Uganda and the masses, both Uganda and abroad and well-wishers, to realize the NDP3 and the vision. And this will imply communicating better, and this platform comes a long way to starting this process. We need these more conversations as we popularize the vision and implementing the vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Fred. Fred, what is your last point that you want us to walk away with? 1 minute, please. Fred?
Thank you very much, Apofia. Thank you, CASO team, for organizing this. I think it's provided for a very good debate on a good vision and plan. And I think the vision and plan certainly shows good will and good intentions for this country. I just want to re-echo what say, which is one, let us mirror and less in the window as we look for what is working.
I no longer hear you, Fred.
Sorry.
Proceed.
Yeah, so I just wondered. Let's look in the mirror and less in the window as where to blame and where the solutions are, rally the entire country so that everybody knows, and really make it less information, more communication on what we're trying to do. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, our dear panelists. It has been a privilege to host you, and our dear participants. It has been a very great privilege for CASO to host you. We appreciate your time and your sacrifice, and we hope we will continue with this engagement. The next webinar next week will be a concluding one in this series, where we will review and come up with a way forward. You do not want to miss this one. We hope we will be with you again here come Saturday, 19th December, to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much. And with that, let me invite Ernest to give us a closing word on behalf of CASO Think Tank and to close us up in prayer. Ernest, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Apofia, for moderating a very insightful discussion On behalf of the Council Board, I appreciate all the panelists, our special guests, all the participants. Thank you very much for joining into this very important discussion about Vision 2040. It is clear that for us to actualize this vision, we still have a lot of work to do to cover the skills gaps, to deal with the question of mindset, especially in public service, to rally the private sector, to reform our education system, to focus on research for development, and for all of us to come together, to work together to see this happen. And indeed, we can come together to see this happen. So we encourage each of us to play our part. Thank God that every cloud has a silver lining. Thank God that COVID has got us to this point of discussing. Let us pray. Father, in the name of Christ Jesus, we thank you for this very insightful webinar that you have enabled us to have. We thank you for each of our panelists, each of our guests, each of the participants. We commend to you, God, the recommendations that have come out of this. We ask you, God, that you will enable us to put them in a usable form. We pray that the policymakers shall see value in them, and that at the end of the day, our nation shall be transformed. At the end of the day, Vision 2040 shall be realized. We thank you, God. We bless your name. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.
Amen,
God
amen,
bless you.
amen. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless you all. I am Apofia Muhimbura, and it has been a great honor to be your moderator for today. Thank you for the great and rewarding time we have spent together, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.